Hey there, friends. It's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. Look, sometimes when you're roaming the internet, you come across an idea that you think is really good, really compelling, and it makes you want to work hard and come up with something even better. And sometimes you just can't do that. And so you steal that idea and use it for yourself. I'm stealing this idea from Jay over at Cold Nights Gaming. If you haven't checked out his channel yet, I highly recommend you do. He makes some great collection videos, well worth your time. The idea of Jay's that I'm stealing today is his top 10 most valuable games in the collection video. I have a collection. Some of the games that I have are also worth some money, so I figured, let's talk about it. Why not? I really should have all these games. So I'm going to have to edit out all of this. Okay, back at it. So let's keep the further ado to a minimum, shall we? There, that seems like enough. Let's get into it. First on the list, number 10, Silent Hill on the PlayStation 1. As a kid, I thought that I liked horror. When I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, I was staying the night at my grandma's house, and she rented for me the movie Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6. And I watched this movie, and I thought it was the funniest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. It was hilarious. Freddy Krueger, what a cut-up. Love that guy. I did not find it in the least bit scary, but it was thoroughly entertaining. So naturally, the next week, at home, I wanted to watch more. Now, I figured that these movies were probably a lot like cartoons and that it wasn't really important the order you watch them in. I watched Part 6 first, for crying out loud, and I had no problem following the story, and I thought it was just as funny as if I had seen all the previous entries, so it didn't really matter to me what I got. Now, the local video store near me only had Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 available. Problem was, they weren't going to rent Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, an R-rated film, to a 7-year-old boy. So I went home and returned a little while later with a note from my mother saying she didn't care. That's fine, he can rent that movie if he wants to. So then I was allowed to rent it, bring it home, and let me tell you this, that movie scared the crap out of me. Let's just put it this way, Nightmare on Elm Street as a series didn't start getting funny with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. It was a little bit later. Suffice to say, I was sort of put off of horror after that for quite a long time. Silent Hill is really the game that jump-started my love for horror as a genre, not just in games, but films, books, everything. The visuals, the sound design, the just creeping, oppressive atmosphere that pervades through the entire experience, it is just supremely entertaining and extremely terrifying. It's a masterpiece. Now, obviously, the series has had its ups and downs over the last several years, but I'm super excited about this Silent Hill renaissance that we're about to experience. I am very here for that. I have my fingers crossed that at least one of these upcoming projects is going to be great. Next up at number 9, we have Dragon Quest V, Hand of the Heavenly Bride. So Dragon Warrior was my first ever JRPG, and I loved it. I think probably, objectively speaking, a lot of my love for it was due to the fact that I was in 2nd grade and didn't have a whole lot of games. Not to mention that even if I did, there weren't a ton of JRPGs, period, at that point in history. But I think even seeing its flaws today, it was still really revolutionary for consoles at the time that this sort of game existed. So fast forward like 30 years, and I still hadn't really played any other Dragon Quest games. That is, until people would not shut up about Dragon Quest XI. And after I eventually played it, I found that I too could not shut up about it. So I figured it was about time that I see what maybe I'd missed all these years. I quickly grabbed the DS trilogy of remakes, 4, 5, and 6, and started making my way through those. I love the split narrative design of 4, where you play all these different characters and their individual scenarios until they all come together at the end. Now, 5 is widely considered to be sort of a high watermark for the series, and I can kind of see why. The multi-generational storytelling mixed in with, of course, the classic Dragon Quest gameplay is really compelling and a lot of fun. Honestly, personally, I'm a little bit mixed on it. I really did enjoy the first, dozen or so hours that I put into it, but around that point, I put it aside and just never felt strongly compelled to go back to it. So, I don't know. Am I missing out? Let me know in the comments if you think Dragon Quest V is worth me revisiting at some point in the future. Next up, number 8, Wild Arms 5. Now, I have never, to this day, played a Wild Arms game. I'm not entirely sure why. No, that's not exactly true. Honestly, I've just never been a big fan of Westerns as a genre, and hearing from the earliest days that this was a JRPG series influenced by Westerns, it just did not appeal to me on any sort of level. Having said that, now that I own all of the mainline Wild Arms games, I have them all in my collection. I don't have XF, and I don't have the Tactics game, but all the regular 1 through 5 mainline games I do own now. So I'm planning on playing through them all in sort of a marathon session like I like to do with series that I've missed out on. Star Ocean is first. I mentioned Star Ocean in my backlog video. That's something I want to tackle over the next year or two. But shortly after Star Ocean, I think Wild Arms is on deck, so we will get to it. Number 7. Chrono Trigger. It's very strange to me to be doing a top 10 sort of list that includes Chrono Trigger, where Chrono Trigger isn't number 1. I know that's not what this list is, obviously, but it still feels weird. Chrono Trigger is my favorite video game, period. It has meant so much to me over the years that I just could not be without it. I actually sold my original cartridge as a teenager in my efforts to save up the money I needed to get a Nintendo 64, because I always wanted the new Nintendo thing. But I didn't wait 20 or 25 years to repurchase Chrono Trigger like I did with every other game that I ever owned in my childhood collection. No, I think I lasted about a year. After I initially sold this, I went and bought it from Funko Land or one of those used game stores back in the day. This particular copy of the game has been through quite a lot. I loaned it to a high school girlfriend whose brother took it and claimed it as his own and wrote his name all over it in Sharpie. And a little bit of rubbing alcohol and some, elbow grease. Got that out and looks pretty good. I don't even think it can really tell that it was defaced any longer. Somehow, after almost 30 years, the save battery is still working too. So I'm just very, very, very happy to have this still after all these years in my collection. It means so much to me. As an aside, I have a variety of Chrono Trigger merchandise here. Here's the original Chrono Trigger box from Japan. It's got all of the stuff in here because Japanese gamers, man, they just seem to take care of their stuff. Like you can so easily and cheaply find boxed Super Famicom games. It's nuts, and everything is just in immaculate condition. So, was happy to pick this up just to have it as a curiosity. Also, my wife Jen is an artist, and she's made me a variety of Chrono Trigger pieces over the years. This is one of my favorites. It's a little felted Chrono doll. Love this little guy. Just some odds and ends. Number 6, Xenosaga Episode III. Some German. Also Sprach Zarathustra. Yes. Xenogears probably slots in there at the number 2 spot on my most favorite games of all time list. So as you can imagine, when the Xenosaga series was announced, I was over the moon. I was just so excited about this series. I'll admit, after playing episode 1, I was a little bit disappointed that the storyline didn't strictly follow the Xenogears Perfect Works story as was laid out in that massive chronology of the history of Xenogears, but it was close enough, and I was just happy that Takahashi was able to fully realize his ambition with this story. I guess that is until he was no longer able to fully realize his ambition with this story. So the original Xenosaga was supposed to be 6 games, and it was cut down to 3. And a lot of what he had envisioned being in the story had to be cut and left on the floor. So what we ended up with was a super truncated, sort of rushed, kind of not incoherent, but essentially 3 games of really varying quality, which is a real bummer. I'm still holding out hope that at some point Monolith will release like a Xenosaga remaster, or better yet, full-on remakes, because maybe they could just, I don't know, pick a graphical style for the characters and stick with it for a few games. It can't be that hard, right? Seriously, the series is all over the place, but I love it. I still love it. So yeah, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama with this particular series, but I was still really looking forward to Episode 3, even after I was kind of disappointed by Episode 2. They're good, though. Honestly, the entire Xeno series, if you're into Xenoblade, I highly recommend, if you can stomach older JRPGs that are missing a lot of the modern conveniences we expect today, the Xeno series in general is well worth checking out. Number 5 is Stray, the I Am 8-Bit exclusive edition. I don't understand why this game is on this list. At the beginning, when I started to write it, I figured that I would maybe include this as a weird kind of bonus sort of thing, but honestly, I don't know. It fits the criteria. It's just a valuable game in my collection, and it's not any sort of collector's edition or special thing that would inflate its value, other than the fact that it was the version of the game sold exclusively through I Am 8-Bit. I don't understand why this is worth as much money as it is. Really, the only difference is that we had to wait several months longer than everybody else to get our version of the game. That's it. So is that worth an extra, I don't know, $190? I guess so. But Stray's fun. I've played a little bit of it. My plan is to play through it with my wife, Jen. She's really more of a cat person than I am. I respect cats, but allergies, you know. But yeah, for the life of me, I could not tell you why this game is worth so much money. It is extremely silly. Number 4, and this might be the only point of direct overlap with Jay's video over at Cold Nights, and that is Koudelka. Koudelka is the sort of gothic horror JRPG hybrid weird oddity that I think I really would have liked as a teenager. I didn't know that this existed until I was well into my 30s. Like, I'd never heard of it, and I don't know if maybe I changed universes at some point. I came over from the universe where Berenstein was spelled the way it sounds, you know? But yeah, this game, I did not know it was a thing. Even when I played Shadow Hearts as a teenager on the PlayStation 2, I played Shadow Hearts. You'd think I would have heard of Koudelka, which was essentially the prologue to Shadow Hearts, but yeah, never crossed paths. I think, kind of objectively speaking, this is a very slow-moving game. The battle system takes a little bit of getting used to, but I did thoroughly enjoy it, so if you're able to get your hands on it for a reasonable price, probably not what it's worth, I recommend giving it a try. Number 3, Albert Odyssey. This may win the award for dumbest name on this list. Albert is not... Look, it's a name, right? It's, I would argue, not a super common name anymore. I feel like most people named Albert tend to be older gentlemen, right? So it's a weird name for a game, but I think it's an even weirder name for an Odyssey. When I think of an Odyssey, I think of something truly epic, right? If your Odyssey's name is Albert, that feels like the epic tale of an accountant or something. Still, it's a Working Designs published Saturn JRPG, so it called to me and I answered that call. I've only played like 30 minutes of this one. I started it up, was enjoying it. The graphic style, the kind of charming old school hand-drawn stuff was great. I managed to get out of the first area and onto the world map, got into a random battle, immediately died, and realized I hadn't saved, and because this is an old school JRPG, there was just nothing. I had to start completely from the beginning. So I put it aside and said, you know what, we'll come back to this one. We'll come back to it someday. And I fully intend to at some point here. There's actually a whole bunch of working designs Saturn games that I would love to get my hands on, but they are all like $300+, so it's gonna take a while, but eventually we'll get to this one. Number 2, Earthbound. So Earthbound is crazy. Earthbound is weird. Earthbound is a freaking classic. This is just a super punishing old school JRPG with probably the weirdest premise that I'd ever encountered at the time when it came out back in '95. If only because it takes place in modern times in a sort of like slightly distorted facsimile of 90s America. You control a group of kids who essentially have to destroy this evil monster from the future, and hang on a second. That's the exact plot to Chrono Trigger. Huh. These developers are copying each other's notes in class. Tisk, tisk, tisk. The music is really funky and strange. The graphics are super simplistic, but they hold up so well by modern standards, but they're just like cute, cartoony, simple line drawing sort of look. It's just beautiful. And the gameplay seems pretty straightforward, and it is largely, but there's a lot of complexity there and a lot of challenge that makes this a lot of fun to go back to. Also, this is not a Rare game. I'm sorry. This was a first-party Nintendo release. This was not Rare. I do not know why this is $340 American dollars. It makes absolutely no sense to me, but it is very good. And finally, number 1, rarest, most expensive game in my collection. And this is actually more expensive than any collector's edition, rare limited edition. It is literally the most expensive game in my collection. The only thing in my collection that is technically worth more money is my PlayStation 5. So, with that preamble out of the way, here's the revelation. Haunting Ground. That's right, one of the holy trifecta of horror games on the PlayStation 2. I was lucky enough to stumble upon this one random day in my local GameStop in their ever-dwindling retro game section, which I think is completely gone now, replaced with like freaking Funko Pops or something. But yeah, they had Haunting Ground in their retro section for $100, which, you know, seems crazy to buy a used game for $100, but even at the time, this was, I don't know, 5 years ago, it was already worth nearly double that, and I knew I was not likely to find a deal that good ever again. So I jumped on it. And honestly, I'm glad I did. I played through this maybe 18 months ago, something like that. And it's actually a really good horror game. Like it controls really well. It's scary. The coolest thing about it is the technology behind it. And I don't fully understand how they did this. But once the game loads, there's no more loading. Like you are exploring this gigantic castle, and you go from room to room, and there are no loading screens. Everything just streams from memory. No idea how they did this. And it also just makes the chase sequences that much more exciting, because you can't rely on getting to a load screen door to get out of trouble. Like these guys are going to continue chasing you because everything is there. You can get anywhere you want. Very cool game. Very worth checking out. I don't know how well the PS2 is emulated. I'm not big on the emulation scene, but if that's the sort of thing that you know something about, I recommend checking it out if you have a way to do so. So at this point, since Jay has one of the 3 games, I'm not going to spoil it because I think you should just go watch his video. I'll link it down in the description below. But he has one of the 3 games. I have another of the 3 games. We just need to become good friends with somebody who has the 3rd game. And then together we will be unstoppable. Jay, maybe you already know somebody. Let's talk. Anyway, that's the list. The top 10 most valuable games in my collection. What do you think? What are your most valuable games? I'm curious to hear your most expensive game. Let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe and do all that stuff if you don't mind. I really appreciate it. And until next time, bye.